Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. Jonathan Livingston Seagull. By Richard Bach. Jonathan Livingston Seagull is a modern fairy tale with current-day elements. Traditional fairy tales usually feature legendary creatures, however in this case you'll find fictional ones. Since everything in the plot hints to something greater than what the story appears to be portraying, this is both a modern fairy tale and an allegorical tale. It's possible to describe this story as a hybrid of an allegorical tale and a modern fairy tale. Richard Bach truly wrote about human life and the way a single person functions within a group by penning a narrative about a seagull that was never happy with the average but constantly sought to achieve something higher. Although the time and location aren't explicitly stated, it's assumed that the location is near the shore and the sea, and that it's now the present day. Throughout the novel, Richard Bach used simple phrases and a straightforward plot to convey his ideas. Storytelling methods such as inner monologues, dialogue, monologues and descriptions are all mixed together in this piece. Richard doesn't get bogged down in the nitty-gritty elements of the story. Livingstone, Jonathan. In spite of his best efforts, Seagull was never accepted by the other seagulls. A daily round of searching for fishermen's scraps was not his primary objective. As a seagull, he had no patience for rules. He aspired to fly at the highest potential speed and in the most efficient manner imaginable. With his daily practice of difficult twists and turns, his boundaries were constantly challenged. He became a lone ranger after separating himself from the group. His parents pleaded with him to return to the flock and try to live with the other seagulls again. He tried his best to please them, but he couldn't stand the way his life was turning out. He had little interest in the flock or the seagulls, and he stayed with the gulls. Regardless of what he did, he always returned to who he was. He practiced flying every day since he was never happy with where he was and wanted to get better all the time. Soon after, he set a new world record of 165 kilometers per hour. After that, he fainted and fell into the water. As he swam, he heard a voice inside tell him that he must accept his limitations in life. Then he chose to return to the flock. Seagulls can't fly at night since they have short wings and poor eyesight compared to eagles, the voice said again at night. Indifferent to the voice's instructions, he continued to soar ahead without stopping. He had a sudden epiphany. He considered bending his wings slightly and flying with the tips of his wings in order to have a better view. He climbed 600 meters and attained a top speed of 260 kilometers per hour without a care in the world. Even though he had promised to be an ordinary seagull, he determined to keep practicing every day regardless of his previous vows. He was quickly clocked at 396 kilometers per hour. Not a single seagull has ever been able to fly at such a high altitude. He couldn't wait to brag about his accomplishments to the other seagulls. However, he was startled when no one congratulated him on his success. Not only that, but the elders in the congregation denounced him for defiling their ranks. He threw him out of the group and told him to go live on some rocks out in the wilderness. Nobody listened to him as he tried to explain the new meaning of life to them. Despite the fact that he was isolated and cut off from the rest of the world, he was content. He was able to eat and take care of himself, and his life made sense. As far as people's lives go, he had a good run. He spotted two seagulls one night. He could see how swiftly they were moving. They escorted them up into the sky from the ground. Even though there were many seagulls who agreed with him, he noted that there were just a few. Since this was just one aspect of life, Sullivan explained to Jonathan that every seagull changes as they learn and that Jonathan had learned everything. The elderly taught him the appropriate techniques for flying and he was soon able to soar even higher. Jonathan was able to return to Earth using only his mind's strength. For him, he was thinking of his prior flock and the lessons they had taught him. Fletcher Lind was waiting for him on the rocks, so Jonathan walked back there. A second seagull, like Jonathan, was expelled from the flock for the same reason. Several more seagulls joined them, and they were practicing their flight as a flock. After months of hard effort, they decided to show the world what they've been working on. The seagulls soon gathered around them, despite the fact that everyone had turned their backs on them. The number of seagulls who wanted to learn to fly was increasing. Jonathan moved on to teach another flock while Fletcher took over as the primary instructor. Fletcher stayed because he was hoping to run across Jonathan. Characters: Seagulls Jonathan Livingstone, Fletcher Lind, Sullivan. Seagull Jonathan Livingstone is the central character. He is depicted as a lone seagull who is unconcerned with the traditions of the flock, preferring instead to follow his own inner urge to learn and grow. He lived his entire life in accordance with his desires, which set him apart from the rest of the pack but also made him ideal. As a seagull, He sought to convince people that they were capable of greatness and that they should rise beyond the slumber of their ignorance and achieve perfection. He informed them that if they wanted to, they could be free. People in control who weren't ready to adapt or gain knowledge and freedom collided in that situation. The seagull was expelled from the flock when the elderly man explained to him the consequences of his actions. It was Seagull's courage and persistence that kept him going while alone. Even though he was alone, he knew every day how fortunate he was to be free and had no regrets about the price he had to pay. The seagull never gave up on his objectives or his quest for knowledge as he pursued excellence. In addition to all of this, he was growing in stature as a result of his concern for those he left behind. Despite the fact that the seagulls had expelled him, he still felt a sense of duty to them and a desire to impart wisdom on them. Forgiving those who wronged him was his greatest virtue. He assembled a small group of outcasts and began teaching them the value of character development. Everyone who joined Jonathan was expelled by the flock, and when they saw he was strong and unique, they dubbed him the devil. He didn't bear a grudge against them when they tried to lynch him. He is regarded as a character who is never happy with what he receives and who is always looking for something greater. Richard Bach David was born in 1936 and is an American author. In 1955, he graduated from Long Beach's University of California. He enlisted in the Navy and the National Guard not long after he graduated from high school. In addition, he served as a fighter pilot in the United States Air Force. After serving in the military, he began writing, and his first 3 works were all about flying planes, reflecting his deep affection for the aircraft. Stranger to the Ground, Biplane and Nothing by Accident were their monikers. He became a household name after the publication of Jonathan Livingston Seagull in 1970. The seagull's flight was described in great detail and wonder in the novel. More than 1 million copies of the book were sold. Flying is a way of life for Bach, and life is about seeking, learning new things all the time, and rediscovering things that others may have forgotten they already knew. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.